was President Trump's second year in office. Also in 2018, an historic summit with North Korea, the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, and the passing of both a former president and longtime senator. Those were just some of the headlines of the year. Here's a look back at those and other top stories of 2018. A strong start to 2018.
The stock market continues to see record gains under President Trump as the new milestone is reached on Wall Street.
Also in January, State of the Union.
The President of the United States.
For the first time, President Trump delivers the annual address. In Hawaii, false alarm.
A missile may impact on land or sea within minutes. This is not a drill.
The mistake sparks widespread panic across the island. And 2 days later, a false alert in Japan warning citizens of a North Korean missile launch. Moving on to February.
We continue to follow the developing situation in South Florida, where 17 people are confirmed dead after a former student opens fire at a high school in Parkland.
Also in February,
the Bible says that all the hairs of our head are numbered.
Evangelist Billy Graham dies at 99 years old. Meanwhile, in Pyeongchang, South Korea, the Winter Olympics kick off. Moving on to March.
Uber suspends all self-driving car testing in cities across the country after a pedestrian was killed by one of its autonomous vehicles in Arizona.
An iconic toy retailer calls it quits.
The biggest toy store there is. Gee whiz!
Toys R Us with news it will close or sell all of its U.S. stores after failing to restructure its debt. Also, a public apology from Facebook.
We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a mistake, and I'm sorry for it.
The CEO admits mistakes in the Cambridge Analytica scandal, plus trade war.
President Trump officially announces new tariffs on Chinese imports as his administration pushes for free and fair trade.
Also in March, Mike Pompeo tapped as Secretary of State John Bolton as National Security Advisor, and no collusion.
The House Intelligence Committee is shutting down its investigation into Russian interference, saying it found no evidence of collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign.
Meanwhile, in Florida,
we are following some breaking news right now out of Miami, Florida, where at least 6 people have been injured following the collapse of a pedestrian bridge.
On to April, a shooting at a Tennessee Waffle House. Also that month, a shooting at YouTube's headquarters.
I want to bring you these live images coming into our newsroom as there are reports of an active shooter at the YouTube headquarters in San Bruno, California.
Also in the Golden State, officials there in California announcing a major break in the decades-long cold case of the Golden State serial killer, plus reported gas attack in Syria.
There wasn't a single shred of evidence that we found that there was a chemical attack. Again, this doesn't mean there wasn't one, but it means that when we looked for evidence that was said to have been there, nothing turned up.
And President Trump pardons Scooter Libby in April. Plus, former First Lady Barbara Bush passes away at 92 years old. Comedian Bill Cosby guilty on all charges in his sexual assault retrial case. Also in April, back in the game.
Ground ball to second, and Scalise throws him out at first. From his knees, the entire infield, the entire field goes over to congratulate him and give him.
Steve Scalise's heartfelt return to the annual congressional baseball game after being shot and critically injured during last year's practice. Moving on to May, royal wedding. Plus, a presidential welcome.
Those 3 former detainees, as the president said, former detainees in North Korea have now officially landed on American soil.
And the first woman to lead the CIA, Gina Haspel, takes the reins, while the nation's top diplomat delivers his first foreign policy speech.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo slams the Iranian regime, warning them the strongest sanctions in history will be applied to their nation if it restarts its nuclear program.
Also in May, film producer Harvey Weinstein turns himself in after being charged with criminal sexual assault. In Jerusalem, the U.S. opens its new embassy, recognizing the city as the true capital of Israel. Plus, another deadly school shooting.
And next thing you know, we hear boom, boom, boom. And then everybody just started running.
8 students, 2 teachers dead after a gunman opens fire at Santa Fe High School in Texas. Meanwhile, in Hawaii, Kilauea erupts. Violent explosions on the Big Island from the world's most active volcano. And in June, Guatemala's Fuego volcano erupts, killing more than 100 people. Also that month, the U.S. withdraws from the UN Human Rights Council.
The Human Rights Council is the United Nations' greatest failure.
Plus, President Trump pardons Alice Johnson.
I want to thank President Donald John Trump.
Meanwhile, in Canada, G7 summit. The U.S. and its 6 allies gather amid tensions over trade.
The president tweeted out that he would not abide by this joint communique, and in fact, he was now looking at new tariffs on Canadian auto products.
Plus, landmark Supreme Court case.
It's a celebration. It's a victory.
The nation's highest court rules in favor of a baker who refused to make a cake for a same-sex couple because of religious beliefs. Meanwhile, in Maryland,
this was a targeted attack on the Capitol Gazette.
Gunman with a grudge opens fire in a newsroom, killing several employees. And historic summit.
More coming out of this summit in Singapore than originally expected. The president saying he received a full commitment of unwavering commitment to complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
The following month, in July, North Korea returns the remains of U.S. servicemen killed during the Korean War. Also that month,
President Trump sits down with Russian President Vladimir Putin for a press conference just before their summit in Helsinki, Finland.
Plus, rescued alive. One by one, an entire soccer team emerges from a flooded cave complex in Thailand after being trapped for 2 weeks. Back in the U.S.,
continuing to follow that developing tragic story out of southern Missouri. At least 8 people are confirmed dead following a boat crash. Local media reports say a tourist duck boat seen like the one on the left capsized and sank at Table Rock Lake.
And EPA Chief Scott Pruitt steps down amid a string of ethics accusations. Plus,
Pakistani-born former congressional IT worker Imran Awan pled guilty to lying on a loan application in exchange for dismissal of related bank fraud charges against his wife.
Also in July,
wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired.
President Trump chimes in on players kneeling in protest. In August,
that it is an honor to serve the American people in your company.
81-year-old Senator John McCain passes away after battling brain cancer, and the Queen of Soul also dies. Aretha Franklin passes away at 76 years old. And the Vatican finally breaks its silence on the sexual abuse allegations.
The church clearly condemns the sexual abuse of minors.
Also in August,
we're following developing news out of Alexandria, Virginia, where the jury in the Paul Manafort case has declared him guilty on 8 counts.
Plus, reality winner, the former NSA contractor sentenced to 5 years. And finding Molly, an illegal immigrant, and the suspect leads police to the body of missing Iowa college student Molly Tibbetts. Plus, Chicago in crisis, one of the deadliest weekends in a city plagued by gun violence. Finally in August, a 6th branch of government.
The time has come to establish the United States Space Force.
Moving on to September, remembering 9/11.
New Yorkers, firefighters, and first responders have all gathered here to pay respects and tribute to the fallen and ones that lost their lives that fateful day.
Also in September, Bill Cosby sentenced to at least 3 years in prison for sexual assault. Meanwhile, early release. The woman convicted of kidnapping Elizabeth Smart is released from prison in Utah 5 years earlier than expected. Plus, deadly explosions.
We are following some developing news right now out of northern Massachusetts as multiple house fires and explosions have been reported following issues with a high-pressure gas main.
Also in September,
around 500,000 people are currently without power in North Carolina as Hurricane Florence continues to batter the state.
And in the hot seat on Capitol Hill,
our interests are aligned with the American people and this committee.
Twitter's CEO and other tech giant execs grilled by lawmakers on privacy issues. Also on Capitol Hill, public testimony by Christine Ford and Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh.
To what degree of certainty do you believe Brett Kavanaugh assaulted you?
100%.
I have never done this to her or to anyone.
And the next month, Kavanaugh is confirmed to the nation's highest court. Also in October,
Hurricane Michael makes landfall on the Florida Panhandle as a Category 4 storm with 375,000 people along the Gulf Coast under evacuation orders.
And presidential alert.
Well, it's the first ever test of the National Presidential Alert System. It's all part of a new system to warn Americans across the country of national emergencies.
Meanwhile, in Florida, the suspect behind suspicious packages sent to prominent Democrats is arrested. Plus, journalist assassinated.
The world is wondering what happened to the missing Washington Post columnist and why he would be a target of the Saudi government.
And from Turkey to the U.S., an American pastor comes home. President Trump welcomes Pastor Andrew Brunson to the White House following his release from Turkish custody. Also in October, the deadliest attack on the Jewish community in the U.S. A gunman opens fire in a Pittsburgh synagogue. November, midterm elections, Republicans expand their majority in the Senate while Democrats take the House. And following Election Day in Florida, ballot recount.
I am standing right outside of Broward County Supervisor of Elections, where taking place 750,000 ballots are being reviewed and sorted until we can start that machine voter count.
Plus, Attorney General Jeff Sessions resigns at the president's request.
The evolution of the nation's top law enforcement officer to where we are today is disparaging compared to the optimistic days of 2016.
Deadly shooting in Southern California.
We're just finding out a little bit more information about the shooting at this bar in Thousand Oaks, which, as you said, has left 12 people dead and multiple people injured.
Also in California,
President Trump expedites a major disaster declaration for California, saying he wants to help alleviate some of the suffering caused by deadly wildfires.
Plus, CNN's Jim Acosta is temporarily stripped of his White House credentials.
If I may ask one more question, Mr. President, if I may ask one more question, are you worried about... That's enough. That's enough. That's enough.
Abroad in Argentina, trade deal at the G20 summit.
The president signs off on the new USMCA, effectively replacing the defunct NAFTA deal.
And a former president passes away.
Former President George H.W. Bush, who has passed away at 94 years old.
December kicks off in Mexico for the inauguration of the new president. Meanwhile, in Argentina, President Trump calls off a meeting with the president of Russia.
President Trump cancels his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Argentina. In a series of tweets, the president said based on the fact the ships and sailors have not been returned to Ukraine from Russia, he decided it would be best for everyone to cancel the meeting with Putin.
Plus, Michael Cohen is sentenced to 3 years in federal prison after being convicted on 8 federal crimes. And Michael Flynn. Prosecutors recommend no jail time for the former national security advisor. Later that month,
new filing by Special Counsel Mueller in General Michael Flynn's case has a lot of people asking questions and is raising red flags.
And a top Chinese exec arrested in Canada on behalf of the U.S. on accusations of violating trade sanctions against Iran, escalating a diplomatic crisis. Also in December, fired FBI Director James Comey says he takes no responsibility for the damage to his former agency.
We had to make very hard decisions in 2016. I knew we were going to get hurt by it. The question was, how do we reduce the damage?
At the southern border,
migrants in the caravan are growing impatient and seek to jump the asylum line, but they're jumping the border fence. The most recent incident involved a father endangering his infant by pushing the baby through a hole under the fence.
Abroad in France.
Developing news. At least 4 people are dead, several others injured after shots ring out at a Christmas market in the city of Strasbourg.
Back in D.C.,
highly anticipated meeting between Democratic leadership and the president exploded into fireworks in the Oval Office.
Shouldn't shut down the government over a dispute, and you want to shut it down. You keep talking about it. The last time, Chuck, you shut it down. No.
In the UK,
the Parliamentary Party does have confidence.
Prime Minister Theresa May survives a no-confidence vote following her handling of Brexit. Back in the U.S., a blow to the Affordable Care Act. While President Trump takes to Twitter praising the decision by a federal judge to rule Obamacare unconstitutional. Meanwhile, in D.C., criminal justice reform, the president signs the First Step Act. Also in Washington, retiring House Speaker Paul Ryan bids farewell.
I gotta say, I leave here as convinced I was at the start
that we face no challenge that can be overcome by putting pen to paper on good sound policy.
Plus,
the U.S. Federal Reserve raised its interest rates from 2.25 to 2.5%.
And the Pentagon begins to pull U.S. troops out of Syria after President Trump declares victory against ISIS. And reports suggest thousands more may soon leave Afghanistan, as Defense Secretary James Mattis announces his retirement. Also in December, William Barr is chosen as Attorney General to replace Jeff Sessions. Mick Mulvaney is tapped as interim Chief of Staff, while Heather Nauert is chosen to replace outgoing UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. Abroad in France, violent Yellow Vest protests. In Indonesia, the Krakatau volcano claims more than 400 lives. Also in December, government shutdown. And finally, 2018 ends in Iraq, where the president and first lady make a surprise visit to deployed U.S. troops. Rachel Acenas, One American News.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.